slides project. ഞാൻ ഇവിടെ നല്ല സന്തോഷം കൊണ്ടുണ്ട്. ഡോക്ടർ പറഞ്ഞാൽ വളരെ താങ്ക് യു വളരെ താങ്ക്സ് ഇത് ക്ഷണിക്കുന്നതിന്. എനിക്കപ്പോൾ നിങ്ങളും അറിയാം കുറച്ച് പേപ്പർ ഇംഗ്ലീഷിലുണ്ടാവും. സോറി അങ്ങനെ ട്രാൻസ്ലേറ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ സമയമില്ല. പക്ഷെ ഞാൻ ആദ്യം ഒരു ചെറിയ സംക്ഷേപം മലയാളത്തിൽ പറയും. അതിനുശേഷം പതുക്കെ ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് പറയും. അതിനുശേഷം ചർച്ച ചോദ്യങ്ങളിലേക്ക് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ മലയാളത്തിൽ ചോദിക്കും. ചർച്ച മലയാളത്തിൽ ഉണ്ടാവാം. പിന്നെ എന്ത് വിഷയമാണ് പറഞ്ഞപോലെ ആന്ത്രോപോളജി ആൻഡ് ഫോൾക്ലോർ. ആന്ത്രോപോളജി ശരിക്കും പറഞ്ഞ സാംസ്കാരിക സ്റ്റഡീസ് ആണ്. പിന്നെ കുറെ വേറെ കൂടിയാട്ടം സ്കോളേഴ്സ് കൂടിയാട്ടത്തിൻ്റെ എസ്തെറ്റിക്സോ ടെക്സ്റ്റോ അങ്ങനെ പഠിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്, അങ്ങനെ ഗവേഷണം ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ട്. എൻ്റെ വിഷയമാണ് കൂടിയാട്ടത്തിൻ്റെ സാമൂഹിക സാംസ്കാരിക ലോകം. അങ്ങനെ 10 വർഷം മുമ്പ് ഞാൻ ഇവിടെ 2 വർഷത്തേക്ക് കുറേ ആർട്ടിസ്റ്റ് ഇന്റർവ്യൂ ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ട്. ആ സമയത്ത് എൻ്റെ ചോദ്യമായിരുന്നു ഇത് യുനെസ്കോ ലോക അംഗീകാരം കൂടിയാട്ടത്തെ എങ്ങനെ സ്വാധീനിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. ഇപ്പോൾ കുറച്ച് കൂടുതൽ ഹിസ്റ്ററി നോക്കാറുണ്ട്. അങ്ങനെ എൻ്റെ വിഷയം ആണ് 10 വർഷം മുമ്പ് ഒരു ഡോക്ടർ M.G.University ഇവിടെ ഒരു കാലിക്കറ്റ് യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റി പ്രൊഫസർ ഉണ്ട്. അവർ അമേരിക്കയിൽ ഒരു ഏറ്റവും ടോപ്പ് തിയേറ്റർ ജേർണൽ പബ്ലിഷ് ചെയ്തു, TDR, ഒരു ആർട്ടിക്കിൾ. എനിക്ക് കുറച്ച് ഇംഗ്ലീഷിൽ പറയാം. പക്ഷേ ആ ആർട്ടിക്കിൾ വെസ്റ്റേൺ സ്കോളർഷിപ്പ് കൂടിയാട്ടത്തിൻ്റെ വെസ്റ്റേൺ സ്കോളർഷിപ്പ് വിമർശിച്ചു. എഴുതിയിട്ടുണ്ട് വെസ്റ്റേൺ സ്കോളേഴ്സ് കൂടിയാട്ടം ഒരു അനുഷ്ഠാനമാണെന്ന് മാത്രം എഴുതുന്നുണ്ട്. കൂടിയാട്ടം അനുഷ്ഠാനമില്ല, തിയേറ്റർ. പിന്നെ ഞാനത് വായിച്ചപ്പോൾ ഇതൊരു സാമൂഹിക സാംസ്കാരിക കാഴ്ചപ്പാടിനെ ഞാൻ ചോദിച്ചു അത് ശരിയാണോ, അനുഷ്ഠാനമാണോ, അങ്ങനെ തിയേറ്റർ ആണോ, അങ്ങനെ അത്ര സിംപ്ലിസ്റ്റിക് ആണോ, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ പുതിയ കോംപ്ലിക്കേഷൻസ് ഉണ്ടോ? അങ്ങനെ ആർട്ടിസ്റ്റ് തന്നെ ചോദിക്കണം. കാരണം ആർട്ടിസ്റ്റ് ആണ് ഇത് അവരുടെ ആർട്ട്, അവരുടെ കല ഏത് കാറ്റഗറീസ് ആണ് അവർക്ക് തന്നെ അറിയാം. സ്കോളേഴ്സ് ഇല്ല, അത് ആർട്ടിസ്റ്റ് ആണ് സങ്കല്പം. ആർട്ടിസ്റ്റിന്റെ സങ്കല്പം എങ്ങനെയാണ് കൂടിയാട്ടം അനുഷ്ഠാനമായ കല, എപ്പോ പുതിയ അനുഷ്ഠാനമാണ്, എപ്പോ തിയേറ്ററാണ്. അങ്ങനെ ഇത് ഗവേഷണം ചെയ്തപ്പോൾ ഞാൻ ഡിസ്കവർ ചെയ്തു കുറേ വ്യത്യസ്തമായ കോണ്ടെക്സ്റ്റ് ഉണ്ട്. കോണ്ടെക്സ്റ്റ് ആണ് അത് നോക്കുന്നത്. എവിടെ, എപ്പോ, ആരാണ് പെർഫോം ചെയ്യുന്നത്, പിന്നെ ഏത് പീസസ്. അങ്ങനെ ഇത് 2 വ്യത്യസ്തമായ ചോദ്യങ്ങൾ, എവിടെ, ആര്, എപ്പോ, ഏത് നാടകം അനുസരിച്ചിട്ട് അങ്ങനെ കൂടിയാട്ടം അനുഷ്ഠാനമാണോ തിയേറ്റർ ആണോ ഇത് ചോദ്യം കോംപ്ലിക്കേഷൻസ് പറയുന്നത്. അമൃതത്തിലാകട്ടോ പോരട്ടോ അന്ന് എന്ന് ഹെറിഡിറ്ററി ആർട്ടിസ്റ്റോ നോൺ ഹെറിഡിറ്ററി ആർട്ടിസ്റ്റ്, പിന്നെ അങ്കുയാംഗം മധ്യവിലാസമോ സുഭാതരചയം, അങ്ങനെ വ്യത്യാസമായ പീസസ്. ഞാൻ അത് ഇവിടെ അത് ഗവേഷണം ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ട്. ഇനി അങ്ങനെ കൂടിയാട്ട കലാകാരന്മാർ കൂടിയാട്ടം 50 പോട്ട് വരുന്നതിന് മുമ്പ് വ്യത്യസ്തമായ വാക്കുകൾ ഉണ്ടായി, വ്യത്യസ്തമായ കോണ്ടെക്സ്റ്റ്, പെർഫോമൻസ് കോണ്ടെക്സ്റ്റ്, കാറ്റഗറീസ് ഉണ്ടായി. അറിയാവുന്നകൂത്ത്, വിശേഷകൂത്ത്, കാഴ്ചക്കൂത്ത്, വാഴിവാദികൂത്ത്. ഞാൻ ഈ 4 കാറ്റഗറീസ് ഇതിനെ കുറിച്ച് നോക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. ആർട്ടിസ്റ്റിനെ കാഴ്ചപ്പാടുന്നുണ്ട്, എങ്ങനെ കൂടിയാട്ടം കാറ്റഗറൈസ് ചെയ്യണം. സ്കോളേഴ്സ് ഇല്ല കാറ്റഗറൈസ് ചെയ്യണം. ആർട്ടിസ്റ്റിന്റെ കാറ്റഗറീസ് അതാണ് സത്യം. ഇനി സ്കോളേഴ്സ് ആർട്ടിസ്റ്റിനെ ചോദിക്കണം, അത് എന്ത് ആർഗ്യുമെന്റാണ്. ഇംഗ്ലീഷിൽ തുടങ്ങാം. It is a hot, humid night in Thrissur, an evening as dark as ink across a page, with barely a sliver of the moon visible in the sky. The mosquitoes are already out in military force. Their bodies so big you can actually feel the sting of their bite. I'm on my way to the male verbal solo performance of Kutiyattam, known as Chakyarkuta. Part of the statewide tourism festival, this performance is held in a wide auditorium on a proscenium stage, as many public performances of Kutiyattam I have seen. Most of the auditorium is empty, with only 25 to 30 spectators present. I sit down as the sharp, metallic beats of the Miravu drum begin. Margi Sajinarayana Chakyar, an artist I know well, comes on stage in the costume of Kutiyattam's clown figure Vidushakan, squinting under the bright glare of the halogen lights. With his sharp wit, he inspires laughter from the audience several times in the next 90 minutes of verbal play, bridging the narrative worlds of the gods and contemporary men. Earlier that day, same day, Satyashan had performed Anthropology at a nearby temple as part of his caste or familial duty. As a hereditary artist, as a chakyar, he still performs on the temple stages of his grandfathers, and that remain closed today still to non-hereditary Kutiyattam artists. This Adhyantara, as temple performance is generally called, used to be his family's only occupation. In exchange for land, food, and clothing, hereditary Kutiyattam actors, actresses, and drummers undertook yearly performances at different temples every year at a specific day at a specific time. That's Adhyantara, every year. The purpose of these performances has largely been described by both artists and scholars as being to satisfy the temple deity, Devika Priti, and achieve a divine blessing for the community at large, or at least to avoid any disaster that may result if it's not performed. So although most Kutiyattams today are performed by a mixture of both hereditary and non-hereditary artists, it is still widely believed if Adhyantara is not performed, some misfortune will befall not only the families not performing, but also the wider community. So it is for this reason that hereditary artists make great efforts to ensure Adhyantara still happen, despite such low remuneration these days that artists usually have to pay most of the costs themselves, ranging anywhere from 25 to 50% of a monthly salary, and they often travel large distances to do so. So Satyashan's performance earlier that day was very different from his performance for the tourism festival in the evening. Within the pillars of the Kuttambalam Temple Theatre, built exclusively for Kutiyattam performance, Satyashan performed not only for the one or two audience members present, but for something more. He told me that while performing on the Kuttambalam stage, he feels a special power that he does not feel performing outside, with good words coming as a result. He told me, I get a special power, a special energy inside the Kuttambalam. This means that it belongs to God. Something special is there. He went on to describe this day of performance, saying, in the early afternoon, I performed at Guruvayur Temple, and in the evening, the tourist festival in Trishur. The same story, same portion, same Sanskrit verse, same shloka. And yet I felt a special power during my Guruvayur performance, but not in the evening in Trishur. Ramanuni, his non-hereditary drummer, can even tell you. He couldn't play inside the temple, so he was a spectator. And he told me afterwards that I performed so well in the temple that the two performances were really different. Like that, a special power comes automatically inside the temple. So we can see from Satyashan's comments the performance context, the where, when, who, and which pieces, is very important to the way that Kutiyattam artists both understand and experience their own performance. Swadhyaya claims a special quality inside the Buddha that he says is for God. Right? So in this talk, I question what are the different contexts and meanings in Kutiyattam theatre. What is the relationship between performance context, where, when, what, by whom, and meaning? As I mentioned in Malayalam earlier, this is a response to recent academic debate by Dr. M.G.'s article entitled Over-Ritualization of Performance, Western Discourses on Kutiyattam. While in his article he sets the terms of debate of Kutiyattam as ritual or theatre, as I explained, I explore the ways that Kutiyattam artists themselves conceptualize these terms in relation to past practice on them and present practice in them. I conducted interviews with over 50 artists over a 2-year period while I was here. And right now I'm here conducting some extra interviews as well. And as I mentioned also, I will look at the different Malayalam categories that artists themselves use to speak of these different contexts. Sometimes it's more ritual, sometimes it's more theatre, sometimes it's a mixture of both. Right? So here my main frame comes from an Israeli-American folklorist, Dan Benamos, in a classic text, Analytical Categories and Ethnic Genres. So this text stresses the importance of looking at categories, what he calls ethnic genres, emic or inside. Emic means inside. Inside categories by those who perform a tradition themselves. Any tradition, any type of expressive cultural tradition, you need to ask the people themselves how to categorize, what to call it, right? And don't impose categories from the outside, from the scholar's point of view, without asking those who perform, right? Essentially. So Kutiyattam. Kutiyattam is often described as the oldest continuously performed theatre in the world. Okay? Part of a larger Sanskrit drama tradition that was at its height about 2,000 to 1,000 years ago. Kutiyattam is the only remaining Sanskrit theatre performance in the world. Right? And is one of the deepest theatre practices remaining today in the world as well. As a oral, it was performed in temple theatres by both men and women by Shakya, Namir, and Namir castes in exchange for land, food, and clothing. The word Kutiyattam is actually, it's a larger, when we say Kutiyattam today, we refer to 3 different types of performances. In the olden days, Kutiyattam only meant multiple actors on stage together, but today we mean it to refer to the entire performance complex. So we have Kutiyattam, which is multiple actors and actresses on stage, maybe here. Namyar Kurtu, the female acting solo, and Shakyar Kurtu, the male verbal solo. It's special within Indian theatre especially for its inclusion of women on stage since its very beginnings. Most Indian theatre traditions, men perform the female roles. And it has incredibly rich narrative expression through mudras, very expressive facial expressions, stylized movements, and Sanskrit dialogue. And it performs plays written by Sanskrit playwrights anywhere from the 2nd to 9th centuries CE. And as I'm sure you've heard, it's focused on the detail of each moment. It means you never perform one play entirely. You only ever perform one act of one play in anywhere from 5 to 41 nights. Okay. So in Kerala in the 20th century, so here comes the Anthropology. Right? Kutiyattam was greatly affected by the very intense socio-cultural changes in Kerala, which scholar Robin Jeffrey has called a social collapse more complete than anywhere else in India. This included the crumbling of royal patronage, social movements to open temples, the establishment of Kerala's state, the coming to power of a communist government, and the associated land reform that actually took away most of the land that artists had for sustenance. And then state legislation officially destroying Kottayam. Right? And Kottayam is the family base of the Kutiyattam community. So during this 20th century, many members of Kutiyattam families came to reject the feudal social order, like many others in Kerala, and they set out to find new jobs, right? And the art came under crisis. How will it continue? So considered unthinkable at the time. Oh, sorry. Considered unthinkable at the time, the first performance of Kutiyattam outside the temple was by Namachakya in 1949. And people now celebrate that as necessary for the survival of the art. This was quickly followed by performances in Delhi and Chennai by Mani Madhavacharya, which is a photo here from the first performance in Delhi in 1964. The first training of non-hereditary students at Kalamandalam, the opening of the Kutiyattam department at Kalamandalam, international tours, and finally UNESCO recognition as World Intangible Heritage, the heritage of humanity. And here we see the proclamation of UNESCO with Amuna Madhavacharya. So today, we have, there's three types of performers in Kutiyattam. Right? So we have two areas, realms, spheres. You have the temple sphere and the public sphere, and they overlap. So in the temple sphere, you have hereditary artists, some of whom have not been trained by institutions, and they perform only in the temples for Adiyandarukutu. They do not perform in other contexts. But then you also have, like Dr. Apana, hereditary, institutionally trained professional artists who perform both in the temple Adiyandarukutu and outside. And then you have non-hereditary artists, also professional, institutionally trained, who perform only outside the temple. So we have these three different types of performers today. So as Dr. M.G.University has written, in the history of Western scholarship on Kutiyattam, the art has mostly been described as having a religious function. More specifically, his critique is of American scholarship, because all of the scholars that he critiques are from the US, Diane Doherty, Farley Richmond, and Bruce Sullivan. He argues that Western depictions of Kutiyattam as ritual do the art a disservice by ignoring Kutiyattam's rich aesthetics through what he calls an Orientalist preoccupation with the East as dominated by religious belief. So his main argument is that Kutiyattam, when it came into the temple, his argument is that Kutiyattam was originally a royal performance outside of the temple, and only later it came into the temple. And because it became part of the temple rituals, that's how it became preserved until today. Otherwise, we would have lost it. So he said that once it came into the temple, Kutiyattam incorporated rituals at beginning and end of performance, right? But that the art form itself is consciously artistic and purely theater, is his argument. So he makes very good critiques and very valid points, all of this. But I have a critique of his work and of also most scholarly work of Kutiyattam before now, is that there's an unfortunate trend of scholars leaving the artists outside of the conversation, right? They talk in the academic world, publish papers, talk to each other, but don't talk to the artists or include the artists in the conversation. Right? So in my work, I state that it's the artists themselves, right, who know best how to categorize their own art, and that we need to include artists in any conversation like this. So, the result is that Kutiyattam is not, as American scholar Farley Richmond has written, strictly a ritual performance meant not for the audience, but for the deity, for the god. But it is also not, as M.G.University has written, a system with a theatrical ethos that does not permit devotional approaches. In reality, according to the artist, Kutiyattam can be both ritual and theater and everything in between, depending upon the context. Right? It's always theater, but it can be more or less ritualistic or not ritualistic at all, depending upon when and where and who and what. what. Right? So the Kutiyattam community today is very diverse. It has both non-hereditary and hereditary artists, both young and old. Right? So not everyone agrees. But rather than seeing this as a negative, we can see the different opinions. What do most young artists think? What do most non-hereditary artists say? And we can look at those responses as a way to see changes within the art over time. Okay. So, as several scholars have said, the word ritual is one of the most commonly used but most problematic in scholarship, with no single agreed upon definition. Huskin and Simona have recently written, clear-cut universal definitions of ritual are inherently problematic, especially as many traditions do not have a concept of ritual nor a word that corresponds to the English word ritual. Brückner and Schirmbücher suggest that the dichotomy of ritual and theatre is a conceptual product of European modernity, right, that cannot be applied to other times or other places, especially not to South Asia. And along these lines, I was cautioned by local scholar and long-time Kerala Kalamandalam administrator, Kilamandalam Vasudeva. He told me that Anushtanam is a Sanskrit loan word in Malayalam that is used as the translation of the English word ritual, but that you cannot consider it truly equivalent to two words. So before I talked to Vasudeva Namudipad, I did many of my interviews, and my question to artists was, in your opinion, is Kutiyattam Anushtanam or theatre? Kutiyattam Anushtanam or theatre? So in thinking back, I realized that question is a bit problematic because I'm giving them a choice between these two categories, right? But even so, many artists came with their own categories. They told me what they want to do here. They would say, oh, Anushtana Kala. Anushtana Kala. Oh, Anushtana Kala. I mean, again, the Buddha chamber, Anushtana Kala. And so Anushtana Maitana. So like this, they changed my terms into their own. G. Venu, who is a well-known Kutiyattam artist and administrator, had an illuminating response. He described what he considered pure ritual as something like Kottayam, where the performer in costume, makeup, and headdress becomes possessed by the deity themselves. The actor disappears and the god comes, right? Describing Kottayam as pure ritual, he said Kutiyattam is different to that, with scripts, with dramas written by great Sanskrit playwrights, and the actors playing characters. The actors do not become the characters themselves. So Venu emphasized, if you go into trance in Kutiyattam, Pasa will disappear, Kalidasa will disappear, saying that art only embraces ritual to make it more powerful. So in response to my question, some artists made a time difference, temporal distinction between these. Kutiyattam used to be ritual, but now it's theatre. Kutiyattam anna, ritual inna, theatre mangalan. This distinction has a spatial element, of course, because anna, in those times, only chakyars, namyars, and namyars performed, right? And inna is the time when it's open to everyone to learn. So in saying Anna Anushtana Inna, we have both the space, the who is performing, and the time together, right? In the temple and now mostly outside of the temple. So, in saying that now is a time where non-hereditary artists, right, particularly have this answer. So in saying that now is a time that it is only theatre, it's also stressing that now is a time where people who have to undertake 8, 10, 12 years of training, when they have voluntarily chosen to do this, right? In the olden days you had to, now that they want to. And so it's also stressing that they are voluntarily studying this art and have choice in their future career, and they have chosen this art. Similarly, many made a spatial distinction. Kutiyattam is ritual inside the temple, but outside it is theater. Many said that it is ritual when performed inside the temple, but outside it's for the audience. Inside it's for the god, outside it's for audience. But for many artists, today's temple performance has come to represent what they see as the past of Kutiyattam, the ritualistic past, which survives alongside present-day non-ritualistic performance on public stages. And when I say public stages, this also includes temple performances but outside of the inner temple, right? As festival performances like that. So looking at the Malayalam word for temple performance, Adyandarakutta, gives us a deeper look into this category. So Adyandarakutta takes its root from the words Adyandaram, which means all services traditionally rendered for the temple. Each duty assigned to a certain jati. So Kutiyattam like that was Adyandaram. Also making malas, pumalas like that was Adyandaram also. And then Kutta, which generally means dance or performance. So Adyandarakutta is dance or performance traditionally for the temple. I was told, and you can correct me, I was told that if you say in Malayalam today, you can say it about anything, and it's often used to describe, he did it very fast, low quality, without thinking like that. So, from an anthropologist's point of view, if you see that in Kerala today, people refer to Adyandaram through this phrase, Adyandaram means something fast, low quality. This general idea has come to then decrease the value of actual Adyandarams inside the temple. You can see that these are devalued today in society. Like that, you can see through Adyandarakuttus inside the temple, sometimes there's nobody there to watch. Right? So there's this correlation between the way people talk today and the values that they put in society. So Adyandarakuttu was defined by artists, right, as meaning performance for God, performance in temples, ritual, performance that's done in a devotional manner. And as we saw Sajiashan say, it's often credited with explaining, inspiring an increase in positive energy for performance. So Adyandarakuttu is used to refer to the hereditary temple performance, as I mentioned, each year for a specific number of days. But each day there's an unlimited amount of performance hours available. So the artist can perform as many hours or as few hours as they wish. These performances still have a very strong sense of duty, as I mentioned, by hereditary artists. And so this sense of duty to perform despite personal difficulties, we can see in a story told to me by Dr. Jainti. Dr. Jainti is a Namyarama, the daughter of P.P. Namyar, and she teaches Sanskrit at Sree University up in Tirur. Not the Kalady campus, but she told me the story of her great-grandmother, Amuri, who was an actress who continued to perform the hanging scene of Naganandam. So the hanging scene of Naganandam, the actress wraps a rope around her neck and climbs to a great height, and the rope pigeon falls very quickly and violently to the floor. That was a very famous scene. Actually, Dr. Aparna did that also about 10 years back. That for many years was not performed because it was so dangerous. So her great-grandmother used to perform Naganandam. And several times she performed when she was pregnant. And as a result, lost the pregnancy. Right? She miscarried 7 times. So Dr. Jainti told me that even though her grandmother knew her pregnancies could be lost, she still performed again and again and again this dangerous scene. Such was her devotion to the art, right? Such was her strong sense of duty. So inside, in Adyandarakuttu, there's many restrictions. You have to bathe. You have to be careful after bathing. You can't step on anything from outside the temple, or you have to bathe again and again like this. You also, once the miravas are put on stage, only Namyars, Nanyars, and Chakyars can cross the stage. If If anyone else crosses, they have to walk backwards to erase the steps. Right? So when they say that inside the temple, Kutiyattam is ritual, is ritual, it's with these very strict regulations as part of the imagination. Another distinction is that in Adiyandrukutu, the full play, full performance, unedited, must be performed. Whereas outside performance these days, it's mostly edited in 1.5 to 3 hour segments one night. Right? In the temple, it's minimum 3-5 days, sometimes up to 41. So, Adiyandrukutu has to be performed even if no one is in the audience. It still must be performed. Right? And sometimes, because of this, actors would talk about playing to the lamp. So if an actor's there and there's no one in the audience, they would perform for themselves and for the lamp and for the god. They also described Adiyandrukutu as a requirement to perform everything. So they said, in the temple you need everything, you can't edit anything, and you can't make any mistakes. This is a big thing. If you make a mistake, you have to start again and redo again. So let's say if an actress doesn't learn their part properly, they have to do again and again and again, right? And in that sense, maybe they would never finish the performance. So you have to learn very well so as not to repeat. And actually this morning, Dr. Aparna was telling me she used to perform with her uncle, Parameshwar Chakya, and she remembers if he made a mistake, he would stop the whole performance and go to her and say, let's do this, start again. And he would do it all again, like that. So it has to be perfect inside. When it's for the God's beauty, it has to be without mistakes. Okay. But the interesting thing, as I mentioned, is this, despite temple stages being associated with ritualistic performance for God, right? It's also, artists see it as the space of greatest artistic freedom, because there's no time constriction. They can perform as long as they want. Whereas if they perform outside, they say, finish Sometimes people want only 30 minutes. Right? But inside the temple, they want to perform for 7, 8, 9 hours. They can do that if they want. So like that, they have the freedom to improvise and as much or as little as they want. And here's a photo of today's Nanyarkuku, and here's a photo from the 1930s. Here. So you can see, also there's been many changes in the costume. Also generally in carelessly, that's reflected in the Nanyarkuku costume as well. So the next category is via audience and patrons. So who is sponsoring, who is watching? That's a different contextual category, like I said. So whereas the last two, so Kutiyattam used to be ritual, now it's theater. Kutiyattam is ritual in the temple, but outside it's not. Those answers were mostly given by young artists and by non-hereditary artists in general. Not everyone, but that's the general trend. These next two categories were mostly given to me by older hereditary artists, like Dr. Aparna's father, P.K. Narayan Nambiar, who's 93, his brother P.K.G. Nambiar, who's 90. Like just the older artists have set these categories. So this group of artists, their underlying assertion is that both ritualistic and aesthetic performance for entertainment have always existed together in Kutiyattam. Even before it came out of the temple, there was always Kutiyattam for entertainment, Kutiyattam for the god also, and also both overlapping. Kutiyattam is always theater. Right? So in this category we have opposition of Adiyandrukutu, and then what these artists told me, a different category, Kartsukutu. So Kartsukutu is a word that's not used today very much. many young artists didn't know what it means. They had said, so karcha, right, means view, gaze. And then puta, right, performance. So older artists describe this as a performance that is meant to be viewed and enjoyed. It's a performance for the audience, to be seen. And this is the opposite, very different from Adyantara Kutu, which is performance for the temple, for fulfilling duty, and for God, is generally the descriptions. So whereas I mentioned Adyantara Kutu must happen even if no audience is there, I was told that if no audience comes to Karcha Kutu, it would be cancelled. Then and now, right? If you get on stage, there's no one there, not a single person within 15-20 minutes, right? So Karcha Kutu in those days would be cancelled if no audience. And also, whereas Adyantara Kutu was sponsored mostly by the temple as an annual event, Karcha Kutu was not an annual event, it was a special event. If someone, for example, Dr. Aparna's father, Amana Kutanchakya, told me, that if someone liked an actor or an actress, then they could sponsor, especially one of their programs, invite an audience for them to enjoy their performance. That's Karcha Kutu. When I asked him, what is the Karcha Kutu of today? He said, oh, today almost all Kutiyattam is Karcha Kutu, right? For the audience. A few hereditary artists, older, also mentioned the word Visheshal Kuta. And Visheshal is special, so a special Kuta. But when I asked, what is the difference between Karcha Kutu and Visheshal Kutu? They said it's the same. It's performance, special performance outside of Adyantara. So, the final category, the final distinction is in terms of repertoire. What pieces are you performing? Haikamanayana Chakyar, he told me that he considers all of Kutiyattam repertoire to be Karcha Kutu. All of it's Karcha Kutu. He says that such pieces are performed the same way both inside and outside the temple. That even in Adyantara Kutu, it's theater, it's performed as theater. And for him, it does not inspire a change in his imagination, right? So he said that the differing factor is repertoire. Which pieces are you performing, right? And so instead of saying he gets a special change of energy in Adyantara Kutu, as we saw Satyashan say, Haimkulamrayana instead said he gets such a special change in Varivada Kutu. So, Varivada Kutu is a term referring to a religious offering, Varivada, right, and Kuta. And the two main repertoire pieces for this are called Anguliyangam and Makkavilasam. So Anguliyangam and Makkavilasam is a bit complicated. They're also performed as Adyantara Kuta, but when they're performed as Varivada Kuta, people can pray for children. Right? Pray that if I get a child, I will sponsor Makkavilasam or Anguliyangam, like that, right? So it's associated with a prayer. And in this performance, the actor enters the shrine in costume and rings the temple bell. So only in this performance can the actor ring the temple bell. Right? So if they pray for a child and are given blessed with the child, and after the child turns 1 year old, they have to sponsor this performance. So Saji Ashan that we saw earlier, he told me that his own parents, after their first child, they had one child that died. After that child died, early on, his mother prayed that she would do a Makkavilasam if she was given another child. So after Saji Ashan was born, she was supposed to do a Makkavilasam, but didn't have the funds or the time. They're very expensive, right? The funds or the time to do so. So Saji Ashan himself, after his 30th year of age, he himself did a Makkavilasam for his own birth. So he performed in costume and took himself up to the shrine, thanking for his own birth. But when the same thing happened to his own family, repeated the same prayer, and once his daughter was born, he performed again for his daughter's birth. Same thing, Paitlam Chakya, after 10 years of marriage, had no children. So he promised I'm not sure if it's Anthropology or Natyam, but prayed, and he then received, after that, 2 children. And so with his first daughter, he went up himself and performed, thanking the deity for his daughter's birth. So Paitlam Chakya said, that is ritual, really ritual. Everything else is not. So, in this paper, I have tried to problematize these outside analytical categories of Kutiyattam as either ritualistic, ritual, or theater, either one or the other, right? In looking at the different ways that artists themselves approach these categories through different performance contexts, right? We can see that the answer is much more complicated, that it's on a continuum of both. So Varivada is more on the ritualistic side, right? But Karta is over here. Okay? So we say it's much more complicated. It can be either or both, right? So, like this, you're looking at these words, you're looking at Aryandu Kutu, Varivada Kutu, Karta Kutu, Vishesha Kutu. We can look also into the changing ideas of performance in generations in the community itself. Like I said, a lot of the younger artists think that it used to be ritual, now is theater, or in the temple it's ritual, now it's theater. But the older artists, these categories, even in the temple, it was theater. There was ritualistic and theater, special programs only for entertainment, right? So they complicate this division in time and space. Right? So we can look into the changing conceptions of the Kutiyattam community through looking at these words and through looking at these conceptions. So just one last note, even if as I've argued about the fluidity of Kutiyattam of both of these, it's much more complicated. We have to be cautious about equating these 2 terms with sacred and secular. Right? Oftentimes people say ritual, they think sacred. Theater, they think secular, right? What I call aesthetic theater here is generally what artists have categorized as the purpose of the performance is entertainment, right? Though all of them still will perform the obligatory prayers before performance, right? All of them still do many still do Chola Tuni, right? And many will still admit that they perform with the grace of God. And this isn't to say, as have many Orientalists, colonialists, and many thereafter, that even the secular in India is pervaded by the sacred, right? Scholarship over many years has represented India as an exotic, irrational counterpart to the rational West, right? No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm rather just questioning this dichotomy together. Ritual versus theater, you must question. Sacred versus secular, you must question. Because even quote-unquote secular belief, let's say you're atheist, you don't believe in God, that's still a belief about God, right? So some can argue that's still in the sacred realm. So questioning these categories altogether. Frank Forum, a scholar, has cautioned also about separating the sacred and secular in his work on ritual and play in North India. And he said that many of these theoretical dichotomies that researchers create do not exist in the real world. So this multiple, diverse nature of Kutiyattam artists' own categorizations and conceptions of Kutiyattam helps us to question these dichotomies between sacred and secular and ritual and theater, right? And also shows us the importance of anyone doing research in the arts to ask the artists themselves, to include the artists in the conversation.